we felt it was quality music, and you've got to live by what you believe in.
I think albums are the true statement of a group's work, you know? You have time in an album to show or to indicate exactly what you've been up to over a period of time creatively.
Well, at the end of 1970, Led Zeppelin were really at a great peak in their career as far as the public were concerned, but a bit of a trough personally, because they were so exhausted after almost 2 years of non-stop touring.
At the time of recording the fourth album, Zepp were probably pretty tired from all the touring they've been doing in America, so there may have been some tension there.
Obviously the first three albums had really established them worldwide. They'd worked at a very fast pace, and I think when they get to Zepp 4, it was the first time they'd really taken stock and worked at their own pace.
They'd done 6 tours of America, they'd had 3 platinum albums, absolutely massive. Arguably, they were the biggest live rock band on the planet at that particular time.
Woman! 26,000 larynxes. Woman! Woman! Woman!
In their careers, Zeppelin were huge when they started recording for, you know, successful sell-out tours of America, successful sell-out tours of this country, three albums behind them. But what made it quite interesting was the fact that the press had been quite critical about Led Zeppelin 3 in this country.
You know, if you've listened to all the albums, you'll be able to listen to something and say, that sounds like Zeppelin, because it's a sound, you know. Yeah. But in actual fact, each album is very different. There's a lot of different things on each one. Yeah. And I thought 3 was especially different from 1 and 2, which were basically very heavy sort of music. And there's a lot of acoustic stuff on 3.
Yeah. The third album had been received with a little bit of disdain, even by their hardcore fans over here, because a lot of people considered it a little bit too folky.
Zeppelin 3 tend to get branded as one of the more folky albums. It had a lot of more sort of guitar-y, sort of pentangly, folky, rhythmic tracks on it.
There was no restraint with the whole idea of being with or without an amplifier. I mean, we just did whatever we wanted to do.
They desperately wanted to do something to appease the British media, and more to the point, they wanted to make their stamp on the UK.
I think up to that point, everything had been a whirlwind from '68 when they formed to '71, and it was the first time I think they all took stock, and that's why the album comes out in a very measured way.
By late 1971, Zeppelin were already a worldwide phenomenon, and things were about to get even better. The band retired to Headley Grange to begin the process of recording their fourth album. It was to become an all-time classic.
Hey, mama said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you cool.
I think part of the reason they chose it was, I think, because it was haunted. I think Jimmy Page, in particular, rather liked the idea of creating this somewhat spooky atmosphere, which certainly imbued a lot of Zepp's early recordings.
One of the advantages of not working in a recording studio all the time is if you were in an old house, you could find a cupboard that you could stick a guitar amp in.
Well, I had my amplifier in another room, and I was in there with him, and so was Jonesy. And that was the first album with the mobile truck.
Bonzo came up with riffs by singing them while he was playing odd drum patterns, and Jonesy would come up with great stuff.
Because it was open plan, I think the sound that Page wanted quickly, became apparent. He wanted a vast, expansive sound, which that album has got. And again, it was down to him as a studio craftsman, which he is. He knows the sound he wants to hear.
The way I see recording is to try and capture the sound of the room, the vibe, and the emotion of the whole moment, and try and convey that across. That's the very essence of it. And so consequently you've really got to capture as much of the room sound as possible.
You don't like anybody in the studio when you're playing a guitar, do you?
No. I usually just limber up for a while and then do maybe 3 solos and take the best of the 3. Yeah.
They took it out of the studio because I think they felt that the studio compressed them a little. I think, within 4 walls of a studio, there was only so much they could do.
It's incredulous that Jimmy Page has gone down as saying that he actually used to get nervous in the studio when you consider the amount of sessions that the guy played on. I suppose now it was him, now it was Led Zeppelin, and it wasn't just some fruitcake pop record that he was playing on, that he had to deliver. He's been stated as saying that he got a little bit jittery in the normal studio environment. So it was natural for them to go somewhere where they felt comfortable, where they could take breaks as and when they wanted without looking at a clock ticking.
Black Dog is a very powerful introduction to Led Zeppelin 4. I think they're almost deliberately making this very positive statement because the previous third album had been not criticised but slightly disappointing for some fans who felt it was too much towards acoustic music. They'd made an acoustic statement on that album, and Black Dog was really saying we're back, we're sexy, we're loud, we are Led Zeppelin.
Black Dog is the latest in Led Zeppelin's storming album openers. And by now they're bludgeoning riffs. We're starting to develop some fiendish quirks. The twist on this one comes from a jam between John Paul Jones and John Bonham.
Black Dog was my riff. The first run through was hilarious. So I said, Bonds, he said, what is that? I said, a 4, I've worked it out. A 4 will go straight the way through it. Keep the faith and it'll work,
Well, in this house, this Headley Grange, there was a old black dog there, and one night it went off because it was really quite old, and one night I'd obviously been off, doing the things that dogs do. And came back and slept all day, and it was quite a powerful image at the time, so we called it Black Dog.
There didn't seem to be a more sensible name for it at the time, because a lot of these things had working titles, which is why I sometimes find it difficult to remember what titles are, because we would record and I would know it as that title, and then I would not listen to it again. The ones we played on stage I would remember because then they were the new titles and you would be identified by those titles. But some of these things I'd think, well, what was that? Oh yes, Cow and Gate, or something like that, And Black Dog was a working title and it stuck.
Black Dog is the most amazing riff. Apparently John Paul Jones came in with the riff itself. There's 2 interesting things to it. Obviously it's quite unusual. But on the turnaround, the downbeat moves by an 1/8 beat every time, which throws people and can be quite difficult to play. The basic riff is the famous part. Is quite straightforward, but when you get to the turnaround, you'll see the downbeat keeps shifting each time. At least I hope you will. Which is great for confusing drummers.
Black Dog is the opening track on Led Zeppelin 4, itself probably one of the greatest rock albums of all time. It couldn't have opened in a more astonishingly appealing fashion. I mean, there's that, so it's almost like Page is winding his guitar up at the beginning, as just a little sort of couple of seconds of ding, and then bang, they're off.
I really do believe that if you leave a count in on a track, and I used to do this with Quo a hell of a lot, if you leave the end a little bit ragged, somehow it takes the listener there to the environment. It's not this disembodied piece of music that just has a nicely edited beginning and a nicely edited end.
And those little bits of supposedly outtake just give it it's like a little bit of fresh air. It's like a bit of reality. Oh, they're not that. It doesn't, to me, I never even thought they were outtakes. I just thought they're right. That's part of the track.
It's humanity. It's what happened at the time. If you listen to the start of Black Dog, you can hear the sound of the tape machine starting up, just whirring as the machine was put into record. You can hear what Page later called his guitar army, his scrubbing the guitar and getting ready to rock.
And so I just think they did it because they could.
Hey, hey, mama, gonna make you groove, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you move. What else do you want to know about life? What else do you want to know about Led Zeppelin? You know, that's it. All in two lines, the whole lot, all said and done. Perfect.
This is such a great song, but this shows you how great Bonham is as well, because he's playing along with a melody, but at the same time he's playing all those wonderful rhythmic phrases and all the three different sections of the song.
Why this works, I think, this track is it's very big, it's threatening, it's a defining moment in rock music.
It's a very bold statement, and kicking off with Robert Plant in full voice, screaming and shouting in time-honoured fashion, and being answered in the way that Plant and Page did. That was their kind of showpiece, really, was the way that they worked. Like a traditional blues act, call and response is the phrase, and that's what they did in that piece.
And then you've got the solo at the end of the track. I mean, it's a complete Led Zeppelin, yardstick. It is a Led Zeppelin yardstick, and I think, again, it says everything about the fun they were having. It was relaxed, it was spontaneous, they knew where they wanted to come from. They had a few templates, but nobody really knew where it would end up. And Black Dog is a track that just ends up spiralling off into the sunset, which is fantastic.
Plant and Page slapped their trademark style all over this bludgeoning riff, and Page's solo is actually made up of 4 different overdubs.
He'd done it with overdub guitar parts before. It's a start of him doing very subtle overdubs and layering guitars on there. There's a lot going on in Black Dog, and if you listen to it, it's one of those tracks you need to listen to on the headphones to pick up some of the subtle overdubs.
He's done this for a sonic reason, so that it's almost like a huge backdrop of heavy metal, and that's what is sort of, again, it's sort of it's pinning the listener to the wall. It's sort of, it won't be ignored. It's like you will listen to this track and you'll either love it or hate it, but you will not ignore it.
The band now took the album on the road with a worldwide tour which took in the USA, Japan and Australia, where audiences were introduced to the Led Zeppelin experience with a blistering version of rock and roll.
Rock and roll is again, if you saw Zeppelin live when they were using it as the first song, the intro song, it was just like watching four animals being unleashed from cages. And it was you know, the perfect way to start a set.
Rock and roll sums up everything that they were about. And like Black Dog opens with Page winding his guitar up and letting him fly, rock and roll opens with a little flourish from John Bonham.
Open hi-hats, washing. See those hi-hats, if you ever seen them, just sort of washing in the wind, that's what we say as drummers. Ringo used to do that, Charlie Watts to some degree, in a different form of course, but the principle was the same, just that wonderful wash of hi-hat going all the way through the song.
This great beginning with John flailing at the drums is a nick actually from Little Richard's Keep a Knockin', but you can come in. It's the same beginning. But the thing is this, you see, steal from the best, every artist is a cannibal. And that's a good nick.
They were working on the track Four Sticks, which was just not coming together. And John Bonham went off into this doodle, which was basically the drum part for Keep a Knockin' by Little Richard. Page instinctively fell into the riff. They recorded about 12 seconds of it and it broke down, but then they thought, hey, we got something here. So Four Sticks was temporarily shelved and they went on and recorded Rock and Roll.
You know, recorded in 15 minutes flat, and that's fact, it's not a myth. Within 15 minutes of having the idea, bang, down. You know, no 6 months in the studio then, you know, that's rock and roll.
Rock and roll is one of those riffs which often with Jimmy Page stuff, it's all about the feel of the riff. And you can play the right notes, but it never clicks in right. It's really just the 12-bar progression, and you can get that sort of status quo. And then you could put other notes in to make it sound a bit more interesting. If you're being adventurous, you could. And what Page does is just put them all in. Let's get them all in the same riff. So you get this riff that goes, which is basically all those things are just played all thrown into the same mix. And then what I love is the way he plays all the overdubs live, because he's layered various bits and pieces onto the track, and the key things that he punctuates it with are these high, which is actually following the chord progressions. It's leading into the chord changes. So when he plays through the progression, which goes from A to D to E, which is a standard 12 bar, he leads into each chord like this.
I think why people like it so much, it was a little bit of light relief to the kind of the heaviness of Led Zeppelin, it was almost like it had elements of a pop hit single about it. It was actually very catchy. They've listened to a lot of other rock bands by this point, and they've kind of made an amalgam of all those bands into something that's very, very commercial without it being a single as such. It's about the most mainstream that Led Zeppelin ever got, and I think it actually brought in some new fans for them as well.
The Led Zeppelin rock and roll song is a brilliant song. It just drives along like a lunatic on speed, you know. It's just, not that one would endorse that kind of thing, of course, you know. But I mean, it's so powerful, it just pounds, it just drives, it's fantastic.
You only hear a few bars and you're pulled into it.
It's an arrangement. Not many rock bands can do arrangements, which means actually changing the volume and the tempo and the pace and varying the instruments. Most bands go from A to B, and it's loud at the beginning and loud at the end. So.
The idea of what I had there was to start it with this acoustic piece, and then for it to build almost like an adrenaline rush by the end. And so, in fact, it actually gets faster from beginning to end. It increases in tempo.
Nobody knew, and they didn't know, that it was going to have the effect it did.
You've got a lyric that can be interpreted any way you like.
It was probably the one that got a lot of attention, but it wasn't, the Holy Grail. That took a while.
I think because of the way he writes, he manages to retain an air of mystery.
It just was the last track on side one, but it obviously became a lot more than the last track on side one over the years.
There's a lady shoe, all the glitters is gold, and she's buying the stairway to heaven. And when she gets there, she knows if the stars are all closed, with a word she can get what she came for. And she's buying a stairway to heaven.
Stairway to Heaven, what can you say about it?
It's a fine track.
It's an awesome piece of music.
It's obviously one of the most popular tracks.
It got bigger than life for Led Zeppelin.
Is it Led Zeppelin's finest moment? Yes.
Immense amounts of money made out of sales.
Is it one of the greatest songs ever written? Yes.
Radio play.
Is it the greatest song ever written? Yes, it is.
Etc., etc.
Stairway to heaven. There's a sign on the wall, and she wants to be sure, 'cause Sometimes words have two meanings in the tree.
Is Stairway to Heaven Led Zeppelin's finest moment? I don't think so, by any means. That's the song that separates the tourists from the purists in terms of Led Zeppelin's fans.
It's interesting, Stairway, and it's interesting I did mention it as an outstanding track because it's one of those numbers that people either love or hate. When we play it, it's obligatory as a gig. And we play it at the gig and the audience sing the song. Our singer hardly has to sing it, which is fantastic. So you have a room full of people all singing the lyrics word for word.
It's a song that people love when they hear it on the radio. If you go to real Zepp heads, I think it's one of the last songs they'd pick because familiarity does breed contempt and you hear that song way too much.
There's some strange statistic that if you lined up every time it's being played on American radio, it would just be playing all the time, and that's over the past sort of 30 years.
As Robert Plant says, it was the right song at the right time. And it's not his fault that in years to come it became more of a cliche.
Robert wasn't actually there at the point when I was running it through with Jonesy and Bonzo. He came in once we got it more or less. I know whether he'd been listening outside, but he actually came in and he wrote 60% easy of those words there and then when he actually came in.
Stairway to Heaven, sometimes people regard it as somewhat of a cliche now because it's such a huge song. It is a mega song, you know, it's in the consciousness of a lot of people that don't even like the song. It's in there, burrowing away. It's an amazing piece of music, you know. When Led Zeppelin used to play it live, this was early days of lighters and things, and to see a whole stadium lit up. Now, of course, it sounds so what? But to see a whole stadium lit up as they played that song, it was wonderful.
When we were out touring, and that album hadn't come out, and we played Stairway in the Forum, and we got a standing ovation. I thought, oh, brilliant, you know, because I mean, I knew, well, we all knew it was good, but that was like, you know, for somebody to hear a number, and at that time that was quite a long number, you know, and you know, and for the first time, it's always difficult hearing music for the first time, isn't it, you know? That's how I knew it was quite something, yeah.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
I think it is the perfect arrangement. Although it's an 8-minute song, the build is absolutely magical. And there's a funny thing that happens when you hear it on the radio or a mate plays it again. At first you think, oh no, not Stairway to Heaven again. And almost in spite of yourself, you find yourself getting drawn into it. And it finishes and you think, yeah, that's great. And yet you start out thinking, if I never hear that song again, I'll be perfectly happy. It's a haunting sound.
But it didn't sound stilted, or it wasn't struggling. I mean, so much progressive rock, which went on for about 17 minutes of a double album, maybe, would become, you know, exhausting and lose its way. Whereas Stairway to Heaven, the reason it's so successful, I think, it works like a little compact piece of classical music.
It's probably one of the most famous pieces of music in rock history. We can clearly see in this big romantic theme there are clear echoes of the romantic school of composition. It owes a great debt to Beethoven and Mendelssohn, composers like that. And rhythmically, it's very, very close to J.S. Bach's famous prelude from the Preludes and Fugues. Both pieces are strikingly similar in many respects, both written in C major, both 4/4 time, very similar construction in terms of the melody. And it's also interesting in that the Jimmy Page employs the device of the sharpened F. And it's this unexpected F sharp that makes the the melodic shift in the whole piece. And Jimmy Page introduces that much earlier into Stairway to Heaven, but it's very similar to the kind of call and response structure of the Bach piece with his. So you can see how the two pieces are very closely related. The Prelude and Fugue is quite widely used in rock music. Procol Harum famously employed it, as did Ritchie Blackmore and Rainbow on a number of occasions. So you'll find it quite frequent, and its influence for me is definitely there in Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven has wonderful vocals, beautiful guitar playing, especially the guitar playing, beautiful rhythm section, everything. It's got the lyrics, it's got the feel, it's got the power. It's a 10-minute plus epic, and live it's even better. But the track was ripped off.
The main riff for the song comes from an instrumental by the West Coast band Spirit that Jimmy Page had heard.
I would say to the guys, look, you know, you've got so much money, you're having such an incredible time, people love you. Is there any need to do this? You know, why don't you just recognize that these people originated these songs?
To me, it was sacrilege to bring an album out with a track like Stairway to Heaven and not openly acknowledge where this has come from.
But if you can close your mind off to all the distractions about the song and everything that has surrounded the song since, the original magic is still there on the record.
Once we got to Stairway, that was it. You know, he was in full flight, you know. Not that he hadn't been in full flight beforehand, but I mean, that was it, you know. I mean, during that whole period, you know, not just Stairway, but I mean, it was obvious at that point that he was fully in command there of the lyrics.
The amount of analysis that's gone on, the amount of web chat rooms, the amount of books that have been written just about the meaning of the lyrics is absolutely total and utter bollocks, if you like.
What's it about? Lyrical searching, yeah. Does it make much sense? Possibly does to Plant. Did it really matter? Probably not.
If you want to interpret lyrics in a certain way and it gives you some inner meaning, you bought the material, then that's absolutely fine.
And even if you discount the lyrics, which are whatever they are, it's a lovely melody, one of the most lasting melodies of any rock song. And then, you know, the inventive sort of guitar solo at the end, one of the most inventive guitar solos ever recorded.
It's one of these songs where if you have a moment with either someone else or just a moment where you're watching the sunrise or something, it's one of those moments that this piece of music, if it connects, it's going to connect fully into every vein you've got going and make something inside. Your little atoms are stirred by it. Your being It's one of those songs that actually connects with your being.
She's buying a stairway to heaven.
I still have a very, very, very big place for Stairway to Heaven in my life.
I knew that we were getting a lot of hammerings from different people. The critics, they were saying, oh, it's a hype, it's a hype, it's a hype. That is the reason why on the fourth album there's no title on it. She said, you know, might just as well, what if they say it's a hype, well then this is a good way of saying it isn't a hype, by untitling it and saying, well here we are, you know. It's not being sold by the name of the band, it's the content of the material.
When we did the fourth LP, we thought it was what we'd done was okay. But with all the advent of all this nonsense that was going on, it was agreed that it'd be a good idea just to put it out totally with nothing on it whatsoever. Nothing, no information at all. It was like, if you put out something with no information on it, well then it can't be said that it's a hype, because well, if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to. And so it started with one symbol, put one symbol on it, and it was, well, let's have one for each person, we'll choose our own. And that was it. You know, if you look at the basic cardboard of it, there's no sort of Led Zeppelin down the spine or anything like that. That was the reason for it.
I know various retailers in England ended up scribbling on it in biro. LZ4. Can you imagine buying your copy of a record and some record store owners printed on it with a ballpoint pen?
There were record company problems when the record came out.
The fact there was no title on the cover. It didn't say Led Zeppelin anywhere on the outer sleeve of the album, which caused panic and confusion at Atlantic Records, particularly in America, where they thought, what are these guys doing? How are we going to sell an album with no name on the cover? You've got to have Led Zeppelin on the cover.
There was absolutely no handle for it. There was no band name. There wasn't even a catalogue number. People at the record company called it commercial suicide.
I'm sure Peter Grant probably worried a bit about it, their manager, their all-powerful manager, that he would go along with anything that Jimmy Page suggested.
Got to give him his due. He stuck out for the band. He dug his heels in, and that was it. It got to a standoff where they were withholding the master tapes. They would not deliver the master tapes until the record company relented. And then the record company saw that there was a clause in the contract giving Zepp complete creative control over their sleeves and everything else.
I remember being at the Atlantic office there with a lawyer for 2 hours while he kept bringing out all these books saying, you've got to have that. I said, all right then, if that's what you want to do, then rerun it on the inside bag here, on the inside of the print your Rockefeller Plaza or whatever it is down there. Of course they didn't want to have to do a rerun on it, so it went out like this.
And so the record company had to go along with it.
And I think the thought was that the group was then so powerful, so famous and successful that you didn't need to put the name of the band on the cover. People would just go to this shop and say, I want the new Led Zeppelin album, and they'd know which one it was because it's the album without any name on the cover. So only a few bands could possibly ever get away with that.
This was, they were said, professional suicide to release an album with nothing on it whatsoever. Apart from the symbols. And what do those symbols mean?
There's been a lot written about the four signs. Page said to the others, okay, what I want you to do is go away and come up with a sign that represents you. And supposedly they were going to go to Koch's Book of Signs. Others went elsewhere. But the basic interpretation, as I see it, of the signs is this. What has been called Zoso, which is Jimmy Page's sign, a lot of people have called it Zoso. Apparently, according to Page, it doesn't say Zoso. The Z, with the convoluted line at the bottom, which is an alchemic sign for Mercury, signifies Page's star sign. He's a Capricorn ruled by Saturn. The O and the S and the O, an O with a dot in is said to represent 6. So, of course, so a lot of people have seized on this, that the S is a convoluted 6, that it's 666. But basically it's based around his star sign. The sign for Bonham is a lovely one, the 3 interlocking circles, which apparently is the man, woman, child trilogy. All life, man, woman, child. The fact that it was used as the Ballantine's beer logo is an interesting one, because Bonzo's love of the booze is well documented, and I think he might have seen the Ballantine's beer logo. John Paul Jones' 3 ellipsoids bound by a circle, a trinity bound by the circle, signifies confidence and competence, which is probably all about John Paul Jones. Great arranger, great musician, very, very confident, very at one, very happy with his life. The sign for Robert Plant is a very interesting one, which is the circle of life, and inside is a feather, which signifies the Egyptian goddess Mayat, who was a goddess of truth and justice, which is that apparently Plant wasn't a very good liar at any time, so he chose that. And of course the feather is the sign of the writer. They are the most popular versions of it. As to Zoso's meaning, probably the real inner depth of it only Jimmy Page knows. He was into his occult, he was into mysterious signs, folklore. Aleister Crowley is obviously, he actually bought Boleskine House up in on the shores of Loch Ness because it was owned by the great magician Aleister Crowley.
Very strange. Very, very strange.
It was just all part of the Zeppelin mystique, and I think they played it so well. And what was good about it is that their audience went with it. And even now, you'll walk down any high street and there's a Zoso t-shirt, you know. It obviously worked, because whatever it was, whatever those 4 symbols were, and they were pretty, you know, ambiguous. You know, I don't think there was a game plan. You know, it was just another typical Zeppelin mystique, you know, and great fun, and all part of building, you know, the image. But the image wasn't through multimedia, it wasn't through the internet, you know, none of those things existed. It was an album cover, and it was Led Zeppelin. And if you knew that, you were in the club. If you didn't know it, you were out of the club. And it seemed to be more people wanted to be in the club. So that was the idea, I think.
Fortunately, we were in a position there to be able to say this is what we want, because, you know, we had actually, you know, attained the status whereby that album was going to sell a lot of albums. Not obviously not as many as we didn't think it would sell as many as what it did, but we knew it was going to sell a lot, you know, because of the whole sort of vibe of the band and, you know, everything else.
Well, what was in Days of Vinyl, the second side of Led Zeppelin 4? Some people thought it was a slight disappointment. I suppose there was a lot to live up to after the power of Stairway to Heaven. I mean, that could have been, as I said, it could have been an album track in itself. Just a whole 12-inch LP could have been Stairway to Heaven. But the second side of Led Zeppelin 4 had certain delights which have kind of matured over the years. I think I've grown to appreciate them more now.
Actually, parts of Misty Mountain Hop are a little bit cheesy. The first half-time section to me feels almost a little bit twee in the melody. But this was Plant's lyric supposedly about a gathering with hippies or a meeting with hippies in a park. Some say San Francisco, some say Hyde Park, when they were busted by police for smoking dope. Indeed, Robert Plant was a strong campaigner for pro-marijuana. And this may have been his stance against the anti-marijuana laws at the time.
Yes, I was really out of my mind. Just said a policeman.
It's a great riff.
I had a kind of circular rhythm going to it.
Please, say, oh, get in line. Get in line.
A lot of people tend to think that it's one of the tracks to skip when listening to the album, but actually the leaning on the seventh with the harmonies, those ascending harmony parts, and following the A, G to E riff are actually quite meaty. And I think the harmonies are pretty clever, which is probably where John Paul Jones stepped in to direct them as to how they would move. It's a solid song. It's probably the only overt drug song on the whole album. And I don't think it's any deeper than that, really.
Have you done anything different on your new album?
There's two tracks with acoustic.
Yeah.
Going to California, that's mandolin again and acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
It's just sort of songs that we write and do at the particular time that an album, and we say right, we're going to put them in an album ad, and we do the songs that we write in that particular time.
Robert liked people like the Incredible String Band, and he liked Country Joe and the Fish, and he liked the whole American West Coast whimsy, as well as digging Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and the more funky, deep blues stuff. So his lyrics could be a mixture of sort of flowers in your hair isms and suitably placed grunts and orgasmic screaming to enormous effect.
I found that in California, or the Californian musical scene was at least the spearhead or the great indicator of how music should actually have some bearing on, or at least some little pointers and indications on actual social behavior, if you like, and social awareness. So I came loaded up with that, and Pagey was playing blues and rock and roll, and it was great. If we did nothing else, that was really good.
Spend my days with a woman unkind, smoke my stuff and drank all my wine. Made up my mind, make a new start. Going to California with an aching in my heart.
Going to California is a mellow acoustic song that grew naturally out of a jam, and then later on seemed to take on a life of its own.
It's an interesting song because, I'd already been hooked on Zeppelin with albums 1 and 3, and then later album number 2, and then got into Led Zeppelin 4. And, for the people who got into Zeppelin early, I think it was the power that struck them. So to hear something like Going to California was quite a revelation, and it worked beautifully.
Made up my mind, making you start. Going to California with an aching in my heart. Someone told me there's a girl out there with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair.
Going to California was actually recorded outside, sitting on the lawn. The mandolin there, it's a great vibe. I think you can actually hear a plane going over at one particular point. That lovely droning D sound, it's a beautiful song. The melody is absolutely lovely. And by their admission, it was written as an homage to Joni Mitchell, the Lady of the Canyon. The lady they seek. It's all about, Robert Plant has said that he was in love with Joni Mitchell. Well, obviously he means in the artistic sense, but she captivated people like that.
Took my chances on a big jet plane. Never let them tell you that we're all the same.
Going to California was something that all bands did anyway in the 70s and still do. It's great when you are a new young band, you want to get away from all the dark cold of Europe, the wet weather and the climate. So going to California sort of represents nirvana, or the sort of paradise in a way. But oddly enough, I believe the lyrics were actually inspired by slightly more doomy thoughts about the possibilities of earthquakes. think they were thinking originally about the possibility of an earthquake in California, going to California, but it kind of transpired or transmogrified into a piece more in tune with the hippie West Coast sort of Joni Mitchell vibe, relaxed, laid-back, romantic music, which was yet another facet of what Led Zeppelin were all about.
The sunshine, the women, the whole culture, the laid-back attitude, it seduced young English rock musicians. And let's be honest, they really do owe it to their success in America. They were gods in America long before they became gods over here. They owe pretty much all of their success to how they built this relationship with the American audiences from the constant touring, and the epicenter of their love of America was California.
Led Zeppelin were an English band who America took to their heart. And what are you going to do? You know, 2-month tour in America or a 15-day in England, like Sheffield City Hall, or, you know, whatever. There was nothing big that a band could go on to. Whereas you go to America and you're talking about 20,000, 12,000. They beat the Beatles record at Shea Stadium, which I think was about 58,000. You know, these are numbers of people that paying cash on the night is going to result in a very nice dinner afterwards.
Are you a smash over here as well as over there? As much of?
Well, there's more people here. That's so. Therefore, it's it's a proportional difference, really. It's probably the same, but on a different scale here.
Did you expect this kind of appreciation of what you do?
And not to begin with, because
not to this extent.
No.
We knew we were appreciated by the fact that people were coming along to see us in such great, vast numbers, all over the place, England and the continent and wherever. But no one expected this.
I think when Led Zeppelin 4 burst on the scene, and it was reviewed by critics and the public, and accepted by the public, I don't think they or the band thought of this as kind of a pointer necessarily to some new future. This was representing all the best they could do at that point in time.
It hinted that there were more grandiose things to come. When you listen to When the Levee Breaks, it hints at tracks that were to come later, like Kashmir, Physical Graffiti, which remains my favourite ever Zeppelin track.
Led Zeppelin were nearing their peak, really. They were they'd been in the game for a few albums now, and they'd kind of grown into a style of their own, and I don't think we could really see where it was going to go next, but it was certainly a progression and something that sounded very Led Zeppelin.
This was the halfway mark, maybe the high water mark in some respects, because although they did great albums later, Houses of the Holy had some terrific moments, and people talk now about Physical Graffiti, the big double album, as a milestone. But really, Physical Graffiti only had 2 or 3 real standout tracks as a double album. A lot of it was kind of filling, really. It wasn't nearly as coherent as Zeppelin 4.
It wasn't a concept album, but the emotions you've gone through, from Black Dog onwards, and then you've suddenly got this spiralling track at the end, this huge outpouring of blues emotion. What a way to end an album. And it ends with an echo. And it's an echo that says, I want to hear that again.
You cannot talk about When the Levee Breaks without talking about that drum sound, which is one of the most sampled sounds in history. Everybody from Ice-T to Puff Daddy, Chemical Brothers, the Beastie Boys got into trouble over sampling it. It is monumental. There is no drummer can play that groove like John Bonham did.
No one hit the snare drum harder, and nowhere do you hear a snare drum being hit as hard as that opening salvo to that track.
And what happened is, while the rest of the band were at the pub one night at Headley Grange, Andy Johnson himself took delivery of a new drum kit that had just arrived, and with Headley Grange being on 3 stories, they set the kit up in the massive ground floor hallway.
And the microphone, the stairway is leading up all the way round, you know, the stairwell, so to speak. And the microphone is one stereo mic coming out sort of 1.5 floors up above the kit.
And the results were fed through Jimmy Page's Echoplex echo unit, with the result that you get that huge drum sound.
The thing of the ambience, you know, he's starting now to go the whole hog, you know.
Plus, in his absolute element, you know, he wants to be Robert Johnson. Well, on that track he was. You know, the whole chemistry of Zeppelin as a blues band is all there on that track.
That menacing, slow, plodding groove, it just works wonderfully.
If it keeps on raining, levee's gonna break.
A blues band on their own terms, not retro. You know, they took the blues and put it into the 70s, and it still sang great, you know, in the noughties. You know, it just does. It's got the kitchen sink in there, isn't it, Levy?
And When the Levee Breaks, that was a riff that, you know, that I had written round the original Levee Breaks, so to speak. But as far as the recording of it goes, the idea was to bring in something new on each verse. Every time it's something new.
Led Zeppelin were good at using influence, and the influence of the blues was paramount from Zep 1. I think with Levee, it matured again to a point where they could use an old blues track, which it was.
They'd nixed Memphis Minnie's version, which was recorded in '27, I believe, and made it very much their own. This is Zeppelin blues, absolutely at its best.
Strap on their own sound to it, and again, that sound was built out of Bonham's drumming, and Page's guitar on that album, on that track, is just unbelievable. It zips across the speakers, you know, and really jumps out at you. And obviously the Bonham drum sound at the beginning.
But apparently it's just used everywhere. You know, great harmonica, great song, great break in the middle, and great end.
There's also a very spooky kind of feeling about When the Levee Breaks. And of course at the time in England people didn't really know what a levee was. It didn't have any great significance. What is a levee? You know, unless you live in New Orleans you wouldn't know. And now of course When the Levee Breaks takes on new significance, certainly for the city of New Orleans. But obviously these levees had been breaking a lot of times back in the past. If they were writing about it back in the 1920s, it had this apocryphal feel about it. You know, the big flood was coming when the levee breaks, and I suppose really that kind of sums up Zeppelin's future in a way. There was this feeling of power building up behind a dam and something about to break. So Led Zeppelin 4 ends on this rather menacing, hypnotic note.
At one point, in terms of their audience, in terms of the records they were selling, in terms of the numbers of people they were drawing, were they the biggest band in the world? It's not a competition, but the answer is yes.
Having, you know, been part of music like that, which has stood up to the test of time, I think every musician hopes that their music will hold up, and let alone having been part of a fabulous band as well, and to the bargain, you know, it's wonderful.
I'm very proud that people are so enchanted by it, and I think the way that it is now is that whatever it was that people loved is not going to be spoiled. It captured all the elements of the kind of wondrous music that we'd all been exposed to. I think what we did was we were able to translate and kick on. It's like you know, it's like we were a filter for all the good things, and we made something that was particularly original.